Following Yuval Livnat speaking about the Refugee Convention, I'm going to talk today about a particular aspect of the Jews in the wake of the Holocaust. As you see, the title is Those Jews Who Have Sinned Against Judaism, Trials of Jews Suspected of Collaboration. So, in my lecture, I would like to make a link between the post-Holocaust era and the war and occupation in Ukraine through a discussion of the phenomenon of collaboration. Collaboration with the enemy is one of the main characteristics of a situation of occupation. I thought that such a discussion about the post-Holocaust era can provide intriguing insights regarding the situation in Ukraine. In the history of Holocaust, no issue provoked as tremendous emotional turmoil as the issue of Jewish collaboration with the Nazis. In the wake of the Holocaust, Jewish communities throughout Europe established community tribunals in which Jews suspected of collaboration were prosecuted. Such was the case in Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and other countries. Today, I will discuss the legal proceedings held in the Jewish displaced person camps, known as the DP camps, in the American zone of occupied Germany, to understand the Jewish survivor perceptions of collaboration. This perception, as I will argue, can these days be understood in the context of the current war in Ukraine. The records show that the Jewish DPs built a unique net of DP camps that operated according to a political, cultural, and legal agenda, and they were extensively engaged in various aspects of the law. I will focus on the Rehabilitation Code, a special code designed to adjudicate Jews suspected of collaborating with the Nazis. Before getting into the legal proceedings, let me say a few words about the Jewish collaborators, known as the capos, and about the meaning of collaboration. So, who were the Jewish capos? We can find them as both the ghettos and the camps. So, no. איך אני זורקת אחרונת? רגע, שקופית קודמת. זהו, השנייה. לא. זהו. Okay. In the ghettos, there were two groups. The Jewish councils, known as the Judenrat, were appointed by the Germans to run the daily lives in the ghettos. During the deportation, the council were responsible for preparing lists and gathering the Jews before being deported to the camps. The Jewish ghetto police were the executive branch of the councils. Based on diaries, memoirs, and other testimonies, the Jewish ghetto police was the most hated Jewish organ during the Holocaust, mainly because of its role during the deportation. In the camps, Jewish prisoners held various positions such as head of blocks, block registers, capos, where, as a matter of fact, the original meaning is the head of a working group, and the head of a camp, mainly in labor camps, and various other administrative functions. The Sonderkommando, the most dreadful aspect of collaboration, was comprised of Jewish prisoners who were forced to perform various duties in the gas chambers and crematoria. They are all referred to as capos. So what is the meaning of collaboration? First, collaboration is an integral part of any situation in an ongoing occupation. This is a structural issue. Both sides, the conquerors and the conquered, need to have a relationship between them, so each side for different reasons. Those among the conquered who willingly or forcibly take over the task to move between the two groups are known as collaborators. Thus, collaboration is a matter of fact that should not have any added moral or social value. However, there is always an added value attached to acts considered to be collaborative. The value content is an external assessment which varies in every society. For instance, in the Soviet Union, women were prosecuted as collaborators for cleaning the Gestapo offices, and Soviet prisoners of war were charged of collaboration only for the very fact that they had been taken prisoners. Morally or ethically speaking, collaboration is usually conceptualized as an act of betrayal, betraying the state or the ethnic group. However, in the Jews' case, collaboration with the Nazis was understood, as I will show, as betraying the Jewish people. To cope with this sensitive issue, the Jewish DPs established a special court, and they named it the Rehabilitation Court. The outcome has no answer to the question why they named it the Rehabilitation Court. All I could find was that during the session when the court statute was decided, one of the council members asked to change the name because rehabilitation means clearing, and obviously this is not the main purpose of the court. Another member suggested to change the name to the People Tribunal or just the Tribunal. Eventually, the name was not changed, and it was the Rehabilitation Court. The court was granted the sole jurisdiction over Jews suspected of working with or for the benefit of the Nazis. The court sessions began in March 1948, and it kept practicing until the end of December 1950, when the Jewish DP camps were dismantled. Until then, the court dealt with about 250 cases. Underlying the Rehabilitation Court was the understanding that after the mass physical, social, and cultural destruction, the Jewish people, not only the Jewish DPs, needed to reconstruct its social and moral boundaries. In an article titled "Rehabilitation Will Purify the Social Atmosphere," written in June 1948, the author who headed the court explained the principles underlying the establishment of the court. I hope we can...
In 2 minutes we will have a clicker.
Oh, here you say to the right the piece, the original piece in Yiddish, and this is a translation into English. And I quote, the Association of Liberated Jews was tasked with reviving the cultural, spiritual, and material values of the remnants of Judaism. The committee saw the moral purification of the surviving remnants as one of its primary goals. It is our natural aspiration to preserve the moral health of our national organism that underlies the establishment of the Rehabilitation Court. I want to present two of the most interesting parts of the court statute. The first one is the definition of collaboration, that is, how did the Jewish leadership perceive Jewish collaboration within the legal framework? The second one is the penalties the court was also authorized to impose. They didn't call it penalties, but decisions. The court statute defines collaboration with the Nazis as harmful actions against Judaism. This was the only offense the court was authorized to act upon, and here is how the chairman of the court explained this somewhat amorphous definition. Acts that bear the hallmarks of acts against the Jewish people, even the act caused damage to only one person. Thus, it is possible to make sure that the crime's object given to the Rehabilitation Court will not be a single Jew, but rather the Jews in general. I find it fascinating how the survivors put the Jewish people at the center of the legal proceeding of a certain couple. It shows that they understood the meaning of collaboration and the crucial need for a comprehensive communal accountability as opposed to a personal one. It was not a private matter between a Jewish couple and his Jewish victim, but rather an issue concerning the Jewish people in its entirety. It was not only the physical behavior, but its interpretation, an act of betraying the Jewish people, since the various Jewish functionaries were considered to have violated Jewish solidarity and mutual Jewish responsibility. I would like to argue that the decision to define collaboration as an offense against the Jewish people echoes the ancient Jewish halachic law of informer. Jewish traditional law saw the informing of Jews by Jews to foreign authorities as grave offense that must be fought against. The halachic discussions focus on the community, since the issue of the informers was not a private matter but a communal one. The harm caused by the informer was considered a national one, and he was perceived to have violated national discipline. For hundreds of years, the term informer, the Hebrew word muser, was known by every Jew, secular or Orthodox, and during and after the Holocaust, Jews regularly used it while referring to the various couples. They adapted the ancient Jewish halachic law to the new, unprecedented circumstances of the Holocaust. To decide which behavior was harmful to Judaism, as the definition states, the judges developed an intriguing kind of scrutiny, which distanced itself from the overall public discourse that saw all Jewish collaborators as traitors to the Jewish people. The judges carefully examined the background of the conduct attributed to the defendants, their motivations, and their purposes. They did it to understand what the defendants did and why they did it. To answer the question of why they did it, the judges had to visit in their minds the ghettos and the camps to examine the defendant's behavior in his actual surroundings. Looking for the circumstances as motivations allowed the judge to classify the various behavior and to establish a spectrum on which we can find a good couple or a decent police officer figures that wouldn't have been conceivable within the Jewish public discourse at that time. Thus, the judges could set a line, even if somewhat elusive, between a necessary collaboration or one that did not harm the interest of the Jews on the one side, and brutal behavior that derived from a false sense of power or meant to serve a personal interest on the other. The decision of the court ranged from
in a few minutes there will be a clicker, I'm sorry.
Okay, so this is the list of punishments. Sorry for this. So here is the list of punishments. In Yiddish it was called decisions, not punishment, that the court was authorized to impose. The decisions of the court ranged from acquittal to declaring one as a traitor to the Jewish people. Between these two poles, the court was authorized to impose a temporary or permanent ban on engaging in public activity, which represents the desire to create a moral standard required for the sake of the future of the Jewish people. Another decision was extraditing the convicted person to the U.S. Army, As far as I know, this specific decision has been considered in very few cases, but it has never been carried out. The most interesting issue here, one that can give us a glimpse into the judge's mind, is who was declared a traitor to the Jewish people. Based on the court's decision, I realized that only the sadists, those who were the most brutal couples, were declared traitor to the Jewish people. The record shows that they represented a negligible minority. The legal discourse was much more nuanced and more cautious than the public discourse. It also demonstrated a deep understanding of the complexity behind the phenomenon of Jewish collaboration by examining the circumstances in which the acts of collaboration took place. One can imagine a spectrum where on the one side are the sadists, while on the other, the righteous persons. Between those extreme poles, we can find most cases of collaboration, that is, the ordinary men and women desperately searching for ways of surviving. So here are some examples of those who were declared traitors to the Jewish people. The head of a block in a concentration camp was accused of brutally beating Jewish prisoners until they were hospitalized. Another case is about a woman, head of a block in Auschwitz, that was accused of abusing women for no reason, selling food that was meant for the prisoners, and conducting children's selections. Although she was not convicted with a specific accusation regarding the children because of lack of evidence, I guess that the mere suspicion regarding the children influenced the judges. Otherwise, there is no explanation for the severe punishment since the testimonies against her were relatively mild. On the other hand, in the case of a head of a block in a labor camp who was accused of behaving brutally toward a Jewish prisoner, the court ruled that, and I quote, the beating were not systematic and had no sadistic expression, which was generally common by the head of blocks or lager couple. Thus, the judges did not declare him a traitor to the Jewish people, but only banned him from holding significant roles within the DP camps. This decision represents an in-depth examination of the circumstances in which the defendant was acting. As far as I have seen in the archives, there were no practical results of being declared a traitor to the Jewish people, but one can easily imagine how these persons or their families felt while continuing to live in the DP camps. In addition, the Jewish leadership decided to avoid assisting those convicted by the court in immigration to Palestine or later to the State of Israel. My explanation is that these people were found undeserving to take part in the Zionist project. This is another example of using the law in reconstructing communities' boundaries. It is essential to note that the Rehabilitation Court did not act as a field court that employs swift judgments. On the contrary, it acted upon a strict statute which dictated the rules of evidence, procedure, and substantive law. 3 judges presided over each legal proceeding alongside a prosecutor and a defense counsel. The court summoned witnesses to give their testimonies, and before delivering the verdicts, the judges allowed the defendants to have concluding remarks. The court statute also allowed reviewing the ruling in case of new evidence or miscarriage of law. The statute also states that, and I quote, every member of the Rehabilitation Court must act solely according to his conscience, relying on the moral and social values of the Jewish rule, thereby also presenting the basis of the origin of law. To sum up, The main goal of the legal proceedings was reconstructing or redrawing social and moral boundaries, which is an essential issue in post-occupation era. This is a necessary step to re-establish who belongs and who does not. These boundaries touch the very heart of any national or ethnic group's identity and belongings. From this point of view, the post-Holocaust historical lesson touches the current Russian war and occupation in Ukraine. And I just want to go to the last slide. This is okay. Recently, the English paper The Guardian reported that, and you can see it on the screen, Ukraine has detained the deputy head of newly liberated Kherson City Council on suspicion of aiding and abetting Russian occupation forces. Ukraine state prosecutor has said. The official, who was not named in the statement, cooperated with the occupation authorities and helped with the functioning of public services under the Russians, according to the prosecutor. Ukraine is in a process of rebuilding and redefining itself as a nation separate from Russia. As we saw, prosecuting collaborators as part of a national rebuilding is not new and plays an important role in setting and defining national boundaries, values, and norms. Thank you, and I want to thank Dina for the Guardian excerpt. Thank you very much.
Thank you.